epineurium, or in other words, you have not pierced the epineurium. So this point, I wanted to make it very clear. Number one. Number two, when you give a block, you see the proximal fibers get blocked first and the distal fibers get blocked later. And what is the reason for this? It's because the proximal fibers are supplied by the fibers which are in the periphery, whereas the distal muscular parts are supplied by the nerves which are in the center. So it takes time for the drug to come from within outside. It takes a longer time to reach the core fibers, and hence it takes a longer time for your fingertips to get blocked when you give a block. So the moment you give an interscalene block, when you want to test, don't ask them to move the fingers. They will always be moving the fingers, and don't consider that it's a block failure. And always give 20 minutes time before you think of testing your block. And just to quickly to recapitulate, because I sort of trained everything more practical, this talk is more practical to the day-to-day affairs that we do, because most of you know about the anatomy of the brachial plexus. How will you test? I just want to, because testing the nerve for whether a block has taken or not is very pertinent, whether you use paresthesia technique or whether you use a PNS or use an ultrasound. And all of you know that there is one simple test which is called as the test of 4 Ps. The easiest way to test whether your block has taken is, you want to block the musculocutaneous, 4 nerves to be blocked in an upper limb. So musculocutaneous supplies biceps. So ask the patient to push inside against resistance. If he is not able to do, the biceps is blocked and the musculocutaneous is blocked. Ask him to push it out against resistance. You give resistance outside. If he is not able to do it, the extensors, the radius which supplies the triceps is blocked. Because the triceps is not acting, he is not able to push it outside. Then pinch in the medial surface of the little finger. If he is not able to feel, that means the ulnar nerve is blocked. And pinch on the second finger on the medial side. If he is not able to feel, the median is blocked. This is the simplest way. It's called the test of 4 Ps to find out whether your nerves have been blocked or not by whichever technique you used. So push, pull, pinch, and pinch. Test of 4 Ps for 4 nerves. And the moment you give block, when you wait for 15 to 20 minutes, do the test of 4 Ps to find out whether your block has taken. And if a particular nerve has not got blocked, you give a rescue block in the axillary region. Suppose you have done an interscalene or a subclavian perivascular. You've done the test of 4 Ps. Find out which distribution is not blocked and block that in the axillary region. Okay. Then the next thing which I wanted to speak to this slide is, there are 2 components of a nerve. One is a neural component, other one is a non-neural component, the connective tissue. When it emerges from the roots, the neural component is more. So in the supraclavicular region, the neural component is more. And when it comes to the axillary region, the non-neural component is more. So when the non-neural component is more, the drug which is deposited near the epineurium is taken by the non-neural component, then they get slowly released. In other words, more distal you go when you administer a block, the duration of the block stays for a longer time because the drug slowly gets released like a depot preparation from the non-neural components to the neural component, whereas it doesn't happen at the level of the root. With this in mind, I thought this were very pertinent to know before we go into the few aspects of the anatomy. And as long as anesthesiologist is concerned, in practice, upper extremity blocks equate to peripheral neural blocks in providing anesthetic care. The lower limb blocks are predominantly used for analgesia purposes until otherwise needed to produce an anesthetic cover due to various reasons. The advantage of giving an upper extremity block and surgical anesthesia with upper extremity block is God-given advantage of having all the nerves bundled together at one place. Whereas in a lower limb, the nerves are far separate. You need to block the lumbar plexus and the lumbosacral plexus, and multiple injections are needed. But you could provide an extremely good quality of lower limb surgical anesthesia by your simple neuraxial block. So, except in few indications where the surgical anesthesia itself is provided by a lower extremity block. Otherwise, we can put it this way, upper limb block is for surgical anesthesia and lower limb blocks are for surgical analgesia, post-operative analgesia. Now, in the upper extremity, what we need to know is, the most important thing is you have to be able to identify the interscalene groove. And if you see, this is the scalenus anticus, this is the sternocleidomastoid medial head, the lateral head, the scalenus anticus and scalenus medius. And there goes the brachial plexus. And this is a very nice picture where you have removed the clavicle. It shows the relationship between the subclavian artery and the brachial plexus. And now, if we see how it is divided, it's divided into root. The interscalene block is administered here. At the level of the trunk, you give the subclavian perivascular. At the level of divisions, you're not able to give anything because it's it's posterior to the clavicle. And the infraclavicular block is given at the level of cords, and the terminal branches, you give an axillary block. So it's R, T, D, C. So interscalene at the level of the root, subclavian perivascular or supraclavicular block at the level of the trunk, nothing at the level of the division, infraclavicular at the level of the cord, and axillary at terminal branches. So we need to know that this is very important. You know that brachial plexus gets formed from C5 to T1, sometimes gets a fiber from C4, and sometimes it gets a fiber from T2. If it gets from C4, it's called prefixed. If it's from T2, it's called postfixed. But what is the relevance for our surgical practice? What is important? You need to choose the root level block if you are going to operate around the shoulder, clavicle and shoulder. You have to go to the level of the trunk level block of subclavian perivascular if you are doing to go for any procedure below the mid-arm. Why? If you use an interscalene approach, the chances of C8 and T1 not getting blocked is very high. But if you choose to give an interscalene block for any surgical procedure below the mid-arm, you should use interscalene block along with supplementation of C8, T1, blocking the ulna in the axillary region. Two blocks have to be performed together. So that is the important relevant point as far as this anatomical consideration is concerned. So interscalene block, otherwise it involves the shoulder surgery. And when you decide to do a shoulder procedure, is it enough to give an interscalene block? The answer is you have 5 more nerves to keep in mind when you do this. One is the supraclavicular nerve, which supplies it's called the cape of the shoulder. It's a cutaneous distribution. So individual nerves, we will go into it on separate blocks when we do it. But the nerves to be remembered is supraclavicular nerve, the phrenic nerve, the suprascapular nerve, the dorsal scapular nerve, and the intercostobrachial nerve. These 5 nerves have to be taken into consideration when we give a root level block. When you give a trunk level block for anything that's the supraclavicular approach, the nerves are bundled very close to each other, so the block takes very well. There is no need for any, but this has to be chosen when you do below the mid-arm, any surgeries below the mid-arm. Cord level becomes infraclavicular approach. The only point that we like to emphasize is here, the nerves are spread out, and the end motor response is very important in this. We'll come to it when we do the infraclavicular approach. So all that I wanted you to know was RTDC and the level you block and what is the approach in relation to where you're blocking the nerve. Now the points to remember anatomically, which is very, very important, is when you give a block, safety is very important. And if you do a root level block, that's the interscalene approach, the vertebral artery runs very, very closely to it and anterior to the cords. It's arising from the subclavian artery. It goes up, and that's the vertebral artery which enters the C6 foramina. Interscalene block is a superficial block. You should get it within 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeter. If you try to go very deep, going and hitting the spinous process coming back is not a good technique to adopt, because there is a possibility that you hit it at the level where the nerve is coming out of the foramen. And it might look like it's a paresthesia, but you're just touching one root C5, and patient complains of paresthesia, we administer the drug, the block doesn't take. And more importantly, there is a chance of injury to the vertebral artery. So in interscalene block, at the root level, do not go deep. You will injure the vertebral artery. The second thing is, when you do a subclavian perivascular block, you need to be very, very careful that you don't puncture the subclavian artery. But if you puncture the subclavian artery, there is no issue. Just come out, apply a lot of pressure there, and you can go ahead and do an interscalene, or you can do an infraclavicular approach. But apply constant pressure on this. No harm will be done. But the important anatomy that we need to remember is, when you do a root level block, do not go deep and injure the vertebral artery. And when you do a subclavian perivascular, if you injure the vessel, do not worry. The other thing, which vessel that you need to remember, is the external jugular vein. In 95% of the individuals, it crosses the apex of the scalene triangle. It's a good corollary to find out whether you are in the right place by the external jugular vein. But what is pertinent is, when you puncture the vein, suppose accidentally you puncture the vein, and when you are administering the drug, you need to be very, very careful that when the needle retracts a little bit, it could become intravascular. So you need to keep this in mind as far as the anatomical consideration is concerned. So I'll finish in 1 minute is there, but we'll talk about the lower extremity blocks, the lumbar plexus and the lumbosacral plexus, the sciatic. In the later talks, we are going to individually cover them. But as I said, that they are extremely good for analgesic purposes. And that's popliteal block. We will talk to it later. But this is just, I think anesthesiologists henceforth would be divided into the group which can administer regional anesthesia safely and effectively, and those who cannot. And all of us who think that we need to become more proficient in regional anesthesia, I think irrespective of our age, we should strive to become a part of the regional anesthesia. This is just to show a patient who has just undergone a forearm fracture under a block and who is ready to go back to the room. Street fit, absolutely excellent quality of analgesia, no major side effects when you effectively give it, ability to walk to the restroom without support, and starting oral diet immediately, and pain-free throughout, smiling to the relatives, no post-operative nausea, vomiting, no intravenous IV fluids. You have made a huge difference to that patient on that particular day. So let us all take up this challenge of being a part of history, of having practicing anesthesia in this era of modern medicine, where we should learn each and every technique that is available in regional anesthetic procedures, keep it in our armamentarium, customize the patients based on their requirements, and we should be able to give a regional block as freely and as quickly like you give a spinal anesthesia. And the day we achieve it, we have achieved the goal of making our patients, giving them the best that we could afford, and we make a huge difference for ourselves. Whether the patient life increases or not, I'm sure the anesthesiologist's life increases when successful blocks are placed on a critically ill patient. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Balavenkat. I now request Dr. Rushali to present a small memento to Dr. Balavenkat. Rushali. And actually, we have forgotten to present a memento to Dr. Rushali, so I request Dr. Balavenkat to present it to Rushali. Barter system. Hello. The next speaker is Dr. Gopal. He has come all the way from Hyderabad, and he is one of the 6 directors of Axon Anesthesia Associates Private Limited.